Friends, welcome to another episode of Making Disciples. It's so good to have you with me today. In today's episode, I'm going to be interviewing Andy Butler. Andy Butler is a mate of mine. He comes to our church. He's an absolute star. He works in sports reporting. He's a sports journalist. He does quite a bit with Lent Orient. He's a great guy. He's fun. He's normal. I often tell the story that the first time I met Andy, I'd slept in his sister's bed. His dad's a bishop, and we had a staff retreat, and we were using their bishop's house, and I was using his sister's bed to sleep in that night, and I came downstairs and met Andy, and he says, "Oh, I believe you're sleeping in my sister's bed." It was a little bit creepy. Anyway, we get on very well. Andy is a phenomenal sports reporter. I want to talk to him today about what it's like being a sports reporter, working in the media, and having a Christian faith. And what does that look like? How do you live that out? So we're going to jump in and do that in a second. I just want to remind you, Apprentice to Jesus is out for Lent. Do get yourself a copy. There's information in the show notes, but we want to try and help people engage with Jesus being the blueprint for our discipleship. We don't want to be more religious. We want to be more like Jesus. And if you've not signed up yet, join us on the Apprentice to Jesus webinar for Monday evenings during Lent, starting the 22nd of December. It's totally free. Then I'd love you to sign up. Again, there's a sign up link in the show notes. All we're going to do is have some input, a little bit like the podcast. Just live, time for Q&A with me, direct Q&A, and then we're going to have some breakout rooms where we talk about how we're doing with our discipleship. So it's going to be really good fun, particularly in Lent, looking at how do we grow and flourish as disciples of Jesus. If we're not investing into our faith, then what is really going to happen to it? It will not flourish. So join me as we invest into our faith for Lent. So you can book that place through Eventbrite, and you'll see that in the show notes. Now, today's episode, here we go. Chat with Andy Butler, sports journalist, about faith, about what it looks like in the workplace, and then we're also going to talk about the spiritual runner's wall. So here we go, Andy Butler. Andy Butler, welcome to Making Disciples. I am so pleased that you're with me today. Andy, you are a reporter, sports reporter. You love sports. You get to write about sports and speak about sports. Thank you so much for being on Making Disciples. It's really good to have you with me today.
Thank you, Vicar. And I'm allowed to call you Vicar. I like calling vicars rather than their names because, as you know, I come from a clergy family. So it's nice to not have to call them by their first name. I have such reverence for reverends.
I would have no
reverence for reverends that I like giving them their proper title. I do the same with doctors.
To explain that then, because people were like, well, what's that about? Andy, your dad is the Bishop of Durham.
Yeah.
Which
we can move on from that now.
Which is not an insignificant role. The lovely thing is about you, Andy, is you are not like your dad. Like, you are like your dad, but you're not like your dad. You are very much, you are not in the shadow of your dad at all.
No.
And I think, I absolutely adore your dad, but I actually adore speaking to you more.
That's really nice to know.
I think
he's older though. He's got more stories. Actually, I don't know if he would. But going back to your point about what I call you, people have said to me in the past, "Oh, when I meet your dad, what do I call him? Do I call him Bishop? Do I call him Paul? Do I call him Your Grace?" Which he's had in the past. And I say, "Oh, I usually go for Dad, but you can go for whatever you want." But yeah.
Well, Andy,
that's
today...
Nice that's nice to know that you prefer talking to me than my dad.
Oh, I do. I want to talk to you about sport. And
that's my favourite subject.
Well, exactly. I'm so often, we've said this before, so often church leaders make Sunday the main event. It's all about Sunday. Get more bums on seats. We're not interested in the Sunday. We want to see people living out their faith in real world, and the impact they make Monday to Saturday is actually what faith is about. You read the Gospels are all about what they got up to outside of the synagogue. It's very little mentioned about being inside the synagogue, but yet so much of church life is inside the building. So you have a really interesting set of jobs. You do interesting stuff in sport, reporting, and you've got an interesting little job at the moment with Leyton Orient. For you, how does faith kind of just fit in with? And it's not fitting in, but like faith and work together. How does that work in the media world? Is it easy to be a Christian in that world?
I mean, it's as easy as you want it to be, I suppose, which it sounds like a bit of a cop-out answer straight from the off, but I don't want it to be. But fitting in is, like you say, is probably like the wrong way of looking at it, because then you're suddenly making concessions to one side of your life and the other. I've always been kind of like so keen. In fact, going back to what my dad does is useful, because I've always been so keen to virtually do the opposite of what it is. And that's not just like a psychological rebellion against what your parents do and sort of stuff like that. But my dad is a clergyman, and I kind of always thought, I don't ever want to do that. No offense to you, Chris, I don't ever want to do that. But also, what's the opposite of that then? Which isn't massively going off the rails. And the church is the church, and he's a clergyman. And so I thought, do you know what? I love sport. I really, I've been into kind of like media and journalism for a number of years. And I just thought, I fancy a go at that. Sports journalism, that sounds great. It looks fantastic. So I did it, basically. I went off and trained to be a journalist and got some amazing breaks over the course of my life in terms of what I've been able to do. But then where does faith fit in with that? It's you suddenly are faced with not any more than anyone else does in their life in terms of conflicts that you might have. But for example, people will look at, say, football, for example. At the very nature of it, it's massively competitive. Sport is competitive. I wrote my dissertation on this when I was a student. Can you be a Christian and a competitive sports person? Because the very nature of it is kind of trying to better yourself rather than better other people, rather than kind of like staying humble. Whereas in the media, it's also very, very similar. It's super competitive. It's quite combative. The world of sport is still, unfortunately, kind of like quite male dominated. So you have lots and lots of laddishness, for want of a better phrase. And so you're daily faced with these kind of conflicts where you have to basically make a judgment, right? Am I going to go this way or the other? And fortunately, over the course of my life, sticking to your principles, I've found, is probably the most is the best thing that you can do, no matter how hard it might be in the moment, because then suddenly people look at you in a slightly different way, or respect you for being principled. You can say yes to everything, and you can say yes to this and that, and kind of go off, go in the way that the world wants you to be. But if you stick to your principles, I think it's probably over the course of time, it's the best thing that you can do. How does that manifest itself in a day-to-day way is a good question, because I'll give you an example, right? Virtually, if you're involved in football, you'll probably be involved in journalism. You'll probably be involved in the promotion of something like gambling. Now, the church can have its opinions on it, and different Christians can have different opinions on it. Is it right? Is it wrong? I don't myself. And you're faced with this thing. I was faced with something like that most days. I'm going to have to go into a meeting where I'm talking about the promotion of gambling through my job. How do you do that without compromising your own beliefs? And how do you do that but how do you also do that without, basically saying, no, I don't want to do this job, which is really tough, and it's really, really tricky. So yeah, I don't know how much that answers your question.
Well, the Bible.
I said a lot. I don't know if there's in the famous words of one of my friends, I've said a lot. There's an answer in there somewhere. Just find it.
The answer is being salt and light, isn't it? It's the consistent, just being different, being a bit different, choosing a different way over a long period of time.
Yeah.
A little bit of salt over a long period of time is where you start to be distinct and different. I remember when you first started working for a particular media agency that was well known for their newspapers with page threes.
Yeah.
And there was a particular individual.
There's only one.
There's a particular individual.
You so deftly were tiptoeing around who I worked for, and then mentioned the one thing that would definitely identify it there. But anyway.
Well, there was this one individual at church that was absolutely astounded that you could work for this particular.
Yeah.
And it was at a point when there was a lot of controversy around that particular agency. Yeah. And they were like, how could Andy work for this particular place? Yeah. And my response to that was, I love the fact that Andy is working for that particular place.
Yeah.
Because it's about us being different. And I think one of the things I love about you, Andy, is you are normal. Like what you were trying to articulate, I don't want to be like my dad, I want to do the opposite. What you're trying to say is, I don't want to be religious. And I think there's the Christian faith that's not tied up with religiosity, but lived out in the normal world is exactly what you are. Just normal, living out faith. And when you talk about principles, those principles that you're talking about, those ethics, it's the saltiness of us. It's what makes us a bit different. And you can be salty and horrible. Or over salty, it tastes disgusting. Or you can be salty and like, that actually enhances and brings out and something really beautiful there. And I would say that you are somebody that enhances and brings out the beauty, being normal as a salty, normal Christian. For you, what was it like working in a place that was seen as, by many Christians, I won't want to work there. You shouldn't work there.
Yeah, you could describe it as being like anti-Christian, really. Firstly, I loved it. It was so much fun. I was, and this is the thing that people just, they don't understand about what it's like kind of actually being there on the inside. If you go to work and you go to an office and the 5 or 6 people that you directly work with are really good fun and a great laugh to be around, and you come home and think, I can't believe genuinely some days, I can't believe I've been paid to, have good fun, do the sort of the nature of the work that I want to do. I mean, that's the dream, isn't it? On your point about, working there, and I used to be, I think, probably a bit more belligerent than I currently am, or now am. And I remember someone coming up to me, not at our church, but a different one, and saying, can't, why do you work there? I said, because it surprises Christians mainly. And I just thought that was like, it was probably too belligerent and too snarky of me, but because they also just ended the conversation there. And I just couldn't be bothered with having the conversation at that particular point. But it does surprise Christians, and I've always felt that there's something that, my cell group, my small group at university was called In the World But Not of the World, and comes from the Bible verse, and that's really, really stuck with me. And you soon realize, actually, from my personal point of view and working in sport and that kind of thing, it's you're going to be able to communicate with the people on the inside there. You can whisper on the inside, or you can shout from the outside. Shouting from the outside is what I see as people taking to social media and just, throwing tweets out there, which are so kind of inconsequential because it won't, it doesn't change anything. Or you can go there and talk to people and try and get them to think about things in a slightly different way. And there was definitely conflicts, and there was definitely things I said, no, I'm not comfortable doing that kind of thing, perhaps to my career's detriment, but I'm fine. I'm at ease with that, because you don't want to sell out your own principles like to that sort of degree where it will become detrimental, not just for your career but probably for your life.
Hey, look at what is the biblical principle here. Acts chapter 1, Jesus says, filled with the Holy Spirit, you'll be my witnesses in Jerusalem, Judea, Samaria, the ends of the earth. That list of places is a spiral going outwards. So many Christians want to stay in Jerusalem and send tweets to the ends of the earth. Yeah. They'll tweet it. That, and they do the same with the gay community. Rather than engaging, they throw in a tweet, they throw in a hand grenade, and then wonder why people just get upset with them.
Yeah.
What you are talking about here is actually living your life at the ends of the earth, and actually taking this faith that you have into a place where it looks faithless, but you carry it in such a way that you're bringing about some difference. Somebody somewhere will start to notice the difference there.
And hopefully they do. And if they don't, I tried. And
hey,
sorry, Chris, I just need to bring in some sport in context to it, especially with the idea of me saying I tried. I've just finished reading Arsene Wenger's autobiography, the old Arsenal manager, legendary Arsenal manager, and he's one of my favourite kind of people of all time. And he grew up in a religious family. He wouldn't say that he's that religious now, but he kind of he says in his book, when I get to heaven, which is presumptuous, of course. When I get to heaven, I know that God will say to me, "What did you do?" And I'll say, "I tried to win football matches." And God will say, "Is that it?" And I'll say to him, "It's much harder than it looks." And I love that. And I just kind of go, do you know what? I tried, or I try at least.
What do you do to help you just to keep your faith going that Monday to Saturday? Like what do you do that just helps you keep that faith going in let's call it the real world?
Yeah. I going over the constant kind of feelings and emotions that come with just knowing that you're, like I said, trying to do the right thing, trying to make it a small impact on the world. I probably won't make a big one, and I'm at ease with that as well. And I'm so much better now at not being hard on myself if I'm not living out this idea of a Christian life. And that, it burdened me actually so many years ago, quite early in my career, because then you start going, am I doing the right thing? And asking yourself, am I doing the right thing 10 times a day is really, really not helpful. And fortunately, if you can free yourself from those shackles of questioning everything that you do on a daily basis, does become much more liberating. I love, probably my two favorite Bible verses. I've probably got loads, but the two that I kind of remind myself of are I came to give life, and life in all of its fullness. And I always get the next one wrong. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. I always say my burden is easy and my yoke is light, which, and I just love them. It's kind of, I work in the media, and quite pithy, small, almost slogans are stuff that I deal with and have to do. And it's kind of it says a lot in such few words, which is actually the point of good writing, or good speech. So reminding myself of that, trying to live as full a life as possible, and reminding yourself that actually the burden of following, Jesus is supposed to be easy, then, which I know it's not, and it's not at times, but reminding myself of that is probably how I get keep myself going on a weekly basis.
There's this amazing little story in 2 Kings about a guy called Naaman who's got leprosy, and he goes to the prophet Elijah to get healing, and he ends up being healed, and he's going to have to go back from where he's met Elijah to his home country, where his king will force him to worship another god, to essentially go to this temple to this other god. And he turns to Elijah and says, what do I do? I now believe in Yahweh. I'm going to have to go back and I'll help my king worship the god Ramon in this pagan place. And I love it. Elisha just turns to him and says, go in peace.
Yeah.
And I think some of us need to hear just God say to us, look, where you're going may look like somewhere that you shouldn't be,
Yeah.
But I am saying to you, go in peace, go with my
Yeah.
blessing. Because if the message doesn't make it to the temple of God remote, it's, through somebody, how's it going to get there?
Yeah.
If you don't carry it there, nobody else is going to do it. So go with my blessing. And I love the liberation of that. Go to, these places that if you were to go down a holiness code, well, that's not the place to be. That doesn't seem to be the message that Jesus sends in Acts 1. Go and be my witnesses. Look, I want to use a sport
sorry, Chris. What I love also about that, and it's exactly why you're a vicar and a theologian, because I go, I'm going to pick this. I'll pick a verse from John, and something that Jesus says, and then the vicars and the theologians go, there's actually a great story in 2 Kings, like Nehemiah and Elisha and stuff.
That's my gig. Your gig is latent audience. That's fine. Look, I want to talk to you about sporting analogy. I'm not a sportsman. Everybody knows this. My greatest achievement was going for a run 3 days in a row before I collapsed. I don't do sport. I'm not sporty. A lot of guilt in my life. But the wall, when people are running a marathon, they hit a wall. I want to just unpack this. I think it's helpful for where we are right now. Many of us are saying the same phrase. I'm stuck. I'm fed up. I'm down. I'm hitting rock bottom. I can't keep on going. I feel like I'm hitting something that I can't break through. That language is already within the sporting world. So just talk to us about the wall. You've run, 3 marathons?
Just the 2.
I'm sorry.
Just the 2.
Maybe it should be 3. Talk to us about the wall. What is it? What does it feel like when you're running it?
Yeah. So we were talking before we recorded. You've done a sermon about this literally in recent weeks that I haven't heard, to my shame, but also in a good way, because I wrote something about this very, very similarly earlier this week, and shared it, and in this context of a third lockdown, and how it feels like we are going through this wall stage. The wall is a marathon running phenomenon. It's both physical, or it's equally as physical as it is psychological, though, because you can train for a marathon and you get up to 20, 21, 22 miles. And it will feel hard. Of course, it will feel hard. But then actually on the marathon day itself, you reach this barrier around about the 20 to 21 mile mark where things just seem impossible. You have run so far that you are physically tired, but then there's too long to go, 6 miles or 5 miles, that you can't really quite see the end. Despite knowing that there is an end, it feels too painful for you to carry on, and the adrenaline doesn't kick in, and you can't, it feels like your legs are just dragging so much, because 5 or 6 miles to anyone is still a long way away, even if you've done 20 miles. And so it feels like now, in this period of a third lockdown, we've been locked down for, give or take, I know lockdowns have been different lengths and stuff, but we're 9 months into this period of our life. And so we're about the 75 to 80% mark, all being well. New life will spring in Easter, which is, I'm sure you've already written your Easter sermon, Chris, about that. But we're about 75 to 80% of the way there, before things go back to some sort of semblance of normality, which is exactly the sort of period of time in a marathon race where we would be hitting the wall. And the way that you have to get through it when you're running marathons is take each step as it comes, which is, sounds obvious, but it's also the period where you stop counting up the amount of miles that you do, and you start counting down how much left you've got to go. And my theory, as I've written, is that January will feel really painful because we can't quite see the end. It doesn't feel tangible. It doesn't feel like it's the last month before Easter. But when we get into February, we might start to find that we start counting down the days until Easter, rather than counting up how long we've been in this current lockdown, or how long we've been in this current situation of 9 months. And the wall is the most painful bit, because you're exhausted and you're mentally drained, and you don't have that adrenaline. So what happens when you come out of the wall? And this happened, from my personal experience of literally running a marathon in 2016 in Berlin. I got through the 21-mile mark. I've started breaking through the wall, because then you start counting it down: 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The adrenaline kicks in. You start counting it down. You start counting down the minutes that you should only have left, rather than the hours that you've been running for. And the adrenaline starts kicking in, because you feel the excitement and the emotion of things coming to an end. And we're not quite there yet, but I really hope and pray that next month, maybe when we head into February, then that's when we can start going up. We can start seeing the end, and you start getting that kick of adrenaline. And adrenaline is good for from a physicality point of view, because it does genuinely help you when you're running. But I think mentally and emotionally, it might be helpful for us to, I don't know what it would be, a mixture of dopamine and all the other amines that there are that help your mental state.
I was listening to one podcast, I don't know who said this, but they said that the wall is the darkest moment of the race, because you're in shadow of this looming wall. And I think, we're in this January, it's dark, short days. We can't go out for the walks. We can't go and do the things. We can't go for the, I remember in June, we were going out for cycles, Isaac and I. We were cycling. We can't do that. It's just too wet. It's too cold. So we've not even got the little positive things that were good at the beginning.
Yeah.
The things that made that marathon interesting. We don't have that. It's like the scenery has suddenly become really bleak.
Yeah.
Like we don't have, I imagine doing a marathon in London is quite interesting, because you see the sights.
Yeah.
We don't have sights anymore. We've got wilderness. We're running through a wilderness.
Yeah.
And all we're seeing is rock after rock after rock. And that's what's making it so hard, I think, for us, is that we don't have that thing to look forward to. There's nothing to look forward to.
Yeah.
And so I found that interesting. The darkest moment was in the shadow of the wall.
Yeah.
You couldn't see anything through there. When you did your marathon, what was it? Was it just simply that counting down that helped you get through it? What was I'm going to keep going? What made you keep running?
So in Berlin in 2016, there was these massage beds every kilometer for the last 10 kilometers of the race, because they understand that some people genuinely can't carry on, and that's fair enough. And I'd run past the bays every kilometer and just go, not this one. No, not this one. Because if I stopped, then I probably just wouldn't. I would have continued. I would have probably walked or jogged the rest of the time. But purely from a personal, not quite pride, I am proud of myself of what I achieved. But I did the Berlin Marathon in 2010, and I thought that would be the first and last marathon I did. And in 2016, I did it again, and I had a target time, and I knew I was running to that target time. And I just wanted to get there, and I just wanted to finish it in that time. Unfortunately, I did. But with those kind of 4 or 5 miles left, it was little stimuluses of, once you run past those, the massage beds, you're like, well, I'm not turning back. I'm not going back to them. And then you see the next one come along, and you go, no, I don't. No, I've lasted that last kilometer. And for me at the moment, that's what weeks feel like for me. I'm like, okay, that's 1 week done. Okay, tick that off. Oh, this is another week done. And, tick that one off. And then you start to, now we're in mid-January. And I started thinking about this principle of kind of being in the wall probably on January the 2nd, before a third lockdown had even been announced, but I think everyone knew it was kind of, coming. And now it's, mid-January, and I'm like, oh, great. We're halfway through this month now. That's amazing, because it's not been great, but
Mm.
it could have been worse. And yeah, that is how that principle has kind of has helped me out. But as I said, when I posted this on Instagram the other day, it's just a theory, and it's just basically sports psychology, which is the most appropriate way that I can communicate anything to anyone. But
it fits. I think it fits.
It fits. I like it.
We're running out of time, so I just need to wrap up. But I came across this other little quote recently. I just thought was really nice. Many people die sometime in their 50s because they are, but they are not buried until their 80s because they hit a wall and gave up on life.
That's sad. I'm 31.
There's a danger that we give up too soon. Yeah. And I think with faith, it's sad, but I would say I know of a good number of people who've hit a wall and given up on faith.
Yeah.
And that's just, it's mega sad. James 1, let me read this to you as we finish. James 1 just says this: Dear brothers and sisters, when trouble of any kind comes your way, consider it an opportunity for joy. Consider it as an opportunity for something good, even though it's crap. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you'll be perfect and complete, needing nothing. I think I'm reflecting on, James says here, use this is an enduring time. This is a difficult time. You're getting tested right now. Faith is getting tested. Your endurance is getting tested. Keep going, because what you learn in this season is going to set you up for life. And I think if we as Christians can hold on and find God in the wilderness in this season, then when we're out of it, we really know that God is real.
Mm.
I think for many of us, we were training for a marathon we did not know we were going to have. We hit the marathon as the pandemic. We weren't ready for it. And then we've realized actually the training we were doing wasn't really training at all. We were playing up running a marathon, not actually getting ready for that marathon. As Christians, we were playing at being Christians, not actually diving deep into what all that God has for us. So I think, James talks about endurance. Faith is being tested. Keep going. Let it grow. And that through this process, you'll become perfect, complete, and you'll need nothing. I think that's the challenge. Keep going. It's a learning time, and our faith will grow. Mate, thank you so much for today. Really appreciate it.
Thanks,
You're a star.
Appreciate it.
And I'll catch up with you on Sunday.
Yeah, and I'll see you in human life at some point.
You will.